If you can love yourself, it's walking, let's go, huh? If you can love yourself, you can't love nobody else. If you can't love yourself, you can't love nobody else. If you can't love yourself, you can't love nobody else. If you can't love yourself, you can't love nobody.
What's going on, everybody? We already have our guests on the stage, but welcome to another episode of Teaching Styles featuring JJ Loves to Teach. I am JJ Loves to Teach. We have a dope episode today. We're going to be talking about the creative process, art in general, man. I think that we just going to chop it up, man. I have a really special guest for you guys today. He's already in the video. I'm gonna let him introduce himself, kind of go down with his resume. But yeah, let's give a shout out to Mr. Lee Juaso.
Much love. Blessings to you, bro. To the people that do not know me, I'm Lee Juaso. I started as an illustrator, and I've now found myself doing marketing and videography and really understanding how to break down content creation. And I feel if you can understand something at its core components, you can build anything off of that strong foundation.
That's dope. How have you been, man? I feel like we've talked very sporadically over the last couple of years. I think we should talk about how we met. But before we get there, yeah, how you been, man? I just want to check in with you mentally. How have
Much
you been?
love, bro. Yeah, this is my first year of being like a man. Like I've been like an adult for like 6 years now. But a couple years ago, I met a woman that I wanted to be with, and in pursuit of that, I learned a lot about myself because being independent and especially like traveling the country and running around and doing whatever I want, like I felt that I was only responsible for myself. And the stronger my armor was, the more I was able to accomplish, and that felt fulfilling. But when I wanted to bring someone else into my life, I found that armor did more harm than good. But if I didn't have the armor, harm was done to me. And I had the armor for so long that feeling felt bad. I do not know how much pain and
Yeah,
suffering and just feelings that I didn't even know that I had, I would experience. And it was a very uncomfortable experience, but it was a very enlightening experience as well. And through that, I had to shift a lot of the systems that I had to make me feel safe and feel comfortable in recognition of the wishes of this other person. And in that, I found myself with even more vulnerabilities. So last year was a very vulnerable year for me. And over the course of that, I learned to build myself a structure, not just where I was less reliant on a lot of the people that have held me up for a long time, but less reliant on systems that might not be sustainable for people that I want to carry into my life. And now, for the first time, I have an apartment and I have bills and I have like a regular job that doesn't include mass messaging people online. And it's all been very new and very uncomfortable, but I can feel the growth. I can imagine that when a turtle shell is expanding, it might not feel that good, but it enables them to be far better protected than they would be without it.
mm, that's actually very enlightening, and because now I want to revisit what you just talked about, because I think that that's 100% interchangeable with even the way we view art and how we grow and how we evolve as artists and creatives. But I'm glad you're doing better, man. I mean, big ups to getting your own apartment and you know not to the bills part, but res- you know, it was a very wise person that once said, "I don't want any more responsibilities. and I related to that person very well. That person's name is Tommy Pickles. But yeah, man, not only are you a creative artist and a videographer and stuff like that, I feel like you didn't mention the martial artist part of your resume as well. And I know that I've come accustomed to being a fan of the the student you've become as a uh, to a lot of the things that I've been able to watch over the years. Um, and I don't know if you want to talk more about that. I don't know what exactly you studied, but I've seen it and I've enjoyed it. Being a part of that journey, the part that you allow us to watch, and stuff like that. So I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, someone that's not very relational, as someone that's very value oriented and skill oriented. I
Mm,
entered martial arts because I love the they say the ultimate male power fantasy is self-reliance, to build yourself into a state where you don't need anyone to do whatever you want to do, an ultimate state of self-reliance and self-determination. And when I initially entered into martial arts, I wanted a vehicle to express myself through self-determination and to express that competence that I associated with value. But as I got more involved with martial arts, I learned that all of these arts are built from community. And even if you see one representative of martial arts, like Bruce Lee or Jet Li or Jackie Chan or whatever, there's an entire lineage behind why they move the way that they move and why they change the way that they do. And even for people that are really insular, like Masutatsu Oyama, or like someone like Mike Tyson, who you think they're just like brooding in a corner, hitting a heavy bag in the dark. Even them have like teams. And growing up, not being involved with as many schools or anything, I thought that I could just sit in my basement and train and get strong. And I was true to a point. But when I started traveling the country and meeting different people and training with different people, I saw that you need to accept being a part of a whole. And my armor had been built up so strong through my personal period of cultivation that I wasn't even able to receive what people were trying to pour into me. So now I'm in a really weird phase where I'm like a multifaceted cup, where in order to learn from a person, I have to pour out what has been poured into me initially to fully receive. But in those little facets, there's still pieces, still drops of whatever came before still in me. So when I'm like coming from a kung fu base and I go into capoeira, my hands might be up like I'm ready to defend myself in kung fu. Or when I go into a boxing place, I might not change levels the way that I need to because I'm thinking that somebody might throw a knee. And it benefits me in my personal practice. But for being a good student, it can make it really hard, and I can make the environments that I'm in challenging sometimes. That bring a little bit of chaos to them. And that's something that I really have to be cognizant in my journey as someone that's so internally directed, making sure that my personal development doesn't interfere with the spaces that are welcoming me to come learn and increase that competence.
mm. And do you feel like there's lessons you learned in martial arts that help with um, being a creator, or vice versa?
Definitely. There was a season last year where I was really determined to find people to make them better in their skill so that we could perform together on film and make like movies and stuff. And I started training people to become better. And but what happened is that I was training so many people because I was charging them. So the more people that I train, the more money that I can make. I
Mm,
didn't take time to myself to rest. I took time to myself to train on the stuff that I wanted to train on. And what ended up happening was I trained like 8 people for 2 to 3 hours per person for the entire week. And then at the end of the week, I did a fight scene for myself. And as I was doing the fight scene, I jumped up and I threw this kick and I pulled my hamstring. And that
mm,
made me realize that if I don't take care of myself, I'm just going to keep pouring out for people. And even if they pour in a little to me with like bread or whatever, like my body's going to need to recover. and there's no amount of money that's worth permanently damaging my body. And since then, I've been
Mhm.
very mindful of how I train people, how much energy I pour out. And similarly, I run a lot of social media pages for people. And even though I want to give them the best results possible, I can't burn myself out making content for them when it's going to take away from my ability to sleep, or when studying their brand and making giving them strategy is going to get in the way of either A, building my own business, or B, giving them information that they might not actually even use, because some people will hire you for a job to fix a problem and then not invest in the solution that they have hired you for.
Mm, that's deep. That's deep. Hmm. I might need to. Actually, I'm writing that down. Real quick. I'm sorry. Sorry. I have to get that down real quick. Some people might hire you for a job, but not invest in the solution that they need. Okay. All right. Let's before we get, because I really want to dive a little bit deeper into the history of what led you um to become an artist and a creative, in the ways that you listed earlier. But before that, I do want to kind of go into how we've met, right? And so, real quick, just a little small story. Um, there was this thing in 2020 that affected the whole world. The pandemic, yeah, we're talking about COVID. And during that time, I had just released Injustice League, a poem I wrote in 2020 that became pretty popular in 2021, and and regionally, I would say, and at least online. And during that time, I wanted to create a music video, I guess, or poetry video, animation video, uh, involving something very original, but related to the poem that I wrote about superheroes and um, the black experience. Using those superhero contexts, and so there was this app called Clubhouse, and I was like, what better way to network than to go on here and see if there are animators on here? And that led to the 6 degrees of separation. Long story short, a lot of people put me in connection with Lee. And at the time, Lee was a student of trying to do videos. He was a great artist, amazing artist, by the way, at the time. And I know he's humble. He's not going to say that, but he's an amazing artist. And we'll talk about why later. But we took on, we were very ambitious with creating a project that was supposed to be, Justice League is like 3 minutes and 20 something seconds as an audio track, right? The one that you can find on iTunes and Spotify. I think that's around 320 or something like that. And we got very ambitious because in my head, I know nothing about animation. I know nothing about frames and things of that nature. So I'm like, 3 minutes shouldn't be that bad. And I'm like, we have, and I'm like, oh, I'll give you 12 months to try to work on this project. That way you can do other projects. And we were very, like I said, we got very ambitious. We thought we could knock that out. And we did not realize the the amount of work that would entail over those next 12 months. And we have a very unfinished project today that we are very proud of also, but also we realized that um, you know with the tools that we had at the time, we were very unprepared for a project like that. But because of that, we've been able to bond. Wow. And we've been friends ever since. I want to say, like, that was what, 21, 22,
Yeah, yeah.
and we've been friends ever since. And you know we'll be showing some of those clips later. But I wanted to, now that people know how we know each other, and now we can probably, I don't know if you want to bring that in full circle at some point, but I want to get into what at what point did you become an artist and you knew that you were gifted with the abilities that you have, and and how did that grow and evolve over time?
Hmm. When I was in third grade, I used to draw all the time. Like I used to have my characters and stuff, and my parents sent me to camps to like do art and stuff. But it never really locked in of being an artist until I was in third grade, and I had drawn this girl, and I was in the after school program, and I was in third grade, and this ninth grader came to me, eighth. This eighth grader came to me, and eighth graders were like giants at the time, being
Mm-hmm.
tiny and stuff. And she said, "Hey, I'll give you $20 for that drawing." And I was like, "Oh." And I had never even seen $20 that didn't come from my
Mm-hmm.
grandma or my uncle. And she gave it to me, and I realized, like, wow, these things that I'm creating have value, and I can build
Wait,
things.
that was
Yeah,
in third grade.
yeah. This was in third grade.
Wow.
I went to a private school in Georgia. It was an Afrocentric private school.
Hmm. That's dope. $20 for your first project in third grade. That's I just want that noted, by the way.
Yeah, that's when I realized, like, okay, this has value. And I wasn't like charging people to make art per se, but it made me realize the value of art. And then in middle school, I didn't know that I was doing this at the time, but to process my experiences between all the new media that I was being introduced to, like with Boondocks and anime and stuff like that, and then
Mm-hmm.
also the experiences that I was having with my friends, like riding on the bus and being around children that curse and like that do a lot of stuff that I didn't grow up being around. I used to make a comic where I kind of processed my experience as battles effectively between my friend group and these different cartoon characters. Initially, it was the cast of the Boondocks, and then it expanded to like whatever anime I was watching at the time. And it made me, it put on paper the relationships that I had with the people and the places around me. And through there, when I got into high school, my teacher saw the stuff that I was making. And he was like, "This anime stuff is cool, but you need to be drawing circles and triangles." And at first, it's like, what the heck you mean? But he helped me to understand that when you're an artist, you're not just training your hand, you're training your eye and your mind and your
Mm.
relationship to the world. And if you can draw things that are in front of you, then you have a structure that you can put anything in your mind on top of. And that really expanded my mind. And then when I started studying people like Todd McFarlane, who drew Spider-Man and Spawn and created Image Comics, and like Greg Capullo, who drew Batman and Spawn, and read a lot of American comics, especially from the 90s. And I saw the influences that classical art had on them and their anatomy and dynamism, and then learned about Frank Frazetta. And even like in the modern era, people like Ken Rocafort. I realized that this foundational anatomical scientific structure that I was given in art according to the old masters like Da Vinci and Renoir and Degas and stuff like that had a place. And in the early 2000s, there was a lot of experimentation with like the Vertigo comics and the stuff that Sam Keith was doing, and with like Sandman, and then like a lot of the artists that did stuff on Daredevil. And I realized that you could tell a meaningful story through comics. So first I got really into comics, and then I got into manga with stuff like Battle Angel Alita and Naruto and like Sun Ken Rock. And eventually that led to animation, telling stories through moving pictures. But with animation, initially I used to just like making GIFs, and my entire trajectory of things being raised in an Afrocentric household was, as dope as all this Asian stuff is, there has to be an African root or component or ethos to what is created, because ultimately everything comes from Africa. And if I can figure out how Africa ties to whatever I'm interested in, that's how I can keep myself from going full weeaboo or
Mm.
installing another culture over my own. And so I saw that there was a gap in like representation for Black people with in anime, and I hyper fixated on that and took as much time as I could to figure out how to draw things in what I consider to be an authentic anime style. And once I learned how to do the still drawings that looked like anime, and started making like different screen grabs and stuff, especially because I really liked like the 90s 80s old school anime aesthetic, then I learned how to make them move and got into making gifs. And then from there I tried to start doing scenes. But What I learned in doing animation scenes is that animation is such a layered and involved process, especially the anime of the 80s and 90s, where you had people just locked in a room smoking cigarettes all day, that you have to build that stamina, that artistic stamina, like a muscle. And if you don't build it properly, you will burn out. And what ended up happening to me a lot as I got into animation was that I'd start in with fire and I'd have these crazy storyboards and I'd knock out all of these drawings like in the first couple weeks. And then after that, my progress just plateaued and then fell off a cliff because I didn't have the understanding of how to build that artistic stamina.
Hmm. How did how did that develop over time?
I still don't think I have the stamina to do animation. And that's a thing that comes with maturity, I think,
Mm,
understanding what your limits are and that me knowing that like if I go past more than 10 seconds, I'm going it's like letting out a kamehameha. Like I'm gonna have to reset a little bit.
mm. And then would you because I know we're talking a lot now about the animation part, but as far as like the art and the drawing, do you feel like that has like there has been different nuances or things that you've learned over time that have changed, like from what you were drawing in 2012 versus what you were drawing in 19 or what you were drawing in 24 versus now? Like, is there have there been like what has that evolution looked like?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, when they really like art, they want to draw like their favorite artist. And there was a season where I did that and I would just draw anime characters exactly like they were. But seeing people like Anis Elric and Sakami-chan and Jim Lee, I realized that you could draw any character in any style. You could bend it
Mm-hmm.
more realistically, you could bend it more cartoony. And I realized that the limits that I had as an artist, just I'm never gonna like render muscles like Greg Capullo. I'm never gonna have the dynamism of Mark Bagley unless I literally like only draw like them and draw things that they have drawn and really break that down. But what I can do is combine my influences and steal like an artist and make my own style. So I made a comic called Color of Liberty that's based on the Haitian Revolution. And because I know that I'm never going to have like the crazy dynamic shadows and crazy anatomy and stuff, in order to get the comic out as an idea, I drew it in a really simplified cartoony style, more similar to this comic book called Deadly Class, which has these warped, wonky, cartoony figures. And because it was more cartoony, I could be more violent without being like gory or obsessive. And I tried to see what angle I could take to get my point across without having to push myself to render the mess out of this super detailed drawing. So fortunately, from doing all this study, now I can find a new route or another path to expressing myself, even if it's not what I have in my head, and the audience can still receive it and have a consistent product.
Mm. So, what would you consider is the Lee Juaso style of art
It
currently?
definitely starts with shape language. When you look at a Disney movie, every character is built up of different shapes. Typically, more feminine characters literally have more S curves, more masculine characters have more hard lines, especially in something like The Emperor's New Groove or like Lilo and Stitch. More cute characters have more circles. And what makes characters like Goku unique is that Goku is designed with all these cute round shapes, but in his hair, he has these spikes. Same thing with
Mm-hmm.
Sonic the Hedgehog, and that's how you know that there's a little bit of edge to the character. So when I design character first and really try to think of who the character is and designing them, and then after that I go into what the story is and how the characters connect to the story. There's a lot of stuff you can play with. So even in the Injustice League gifs that we have, the character of the teacher who represents you, he has a round shape, but his hair, his locks are spiked, and like his beard is spiked, and it lets you know that he's not like harmless, like he knows some stuff.
Mm. Yeah, that's good. I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit, but I wanted to get that on camera before we forget about your type of style. But I kind of want to backtrack because there was a something that really intrigued me about your lifestyle growing up, and you said that you come from a very futuristic home, you know, and living, and so I wanted to ask you, and you kind of talked about this a little bit already, but in your works now, whether that be just graphic art or whether that be animation, what type of stories or visuals have you been able to interpret and kind of convey through the lens of the Afrofuturistic style or just Afro style in general? And I know you
Yeah,
already talked about the Haitian Revolution type of thing, but even if you want to expand on that too.
yeah. I un, because I wanted to do a lot in a very short amount of time. The At the same time that I was really digging my feet into art and developing as an artist and a storyteller, I was also doing a lot with commerce, and I was running a website effectively selling black art on clothes from artists from all over the world. And because of that, instead of thinking of art as expression, I ended up training myself to view art as commerce. And what I saw with the people that I was working with and the people that I aspire to work with, like Sean Damian Hill, who worked for X-Men and did East Nana the Were Spider, and all the artists for Concrete Comics and Godhood Comics, and Ronald Wimberly, who did Prince of Cats, and the artists that worked on Bitter Root. I saw that their their content was very black centered, but they weren't getting the support and the sales that they wanted. So for my own edification, I would make stories about the Maroons in Jamaica and the Maoons in Haiti and the Cimarrones in Colombia and even like the Black Seminoles in like Florida. But when it came down to like producing something for the market or creating a finished product, I felt like there was no point in actually taking the time to make the comic or make the book because nobody would want to buy it. And looking back, I wish that I would have taken the time for my own edification to actually create and develop those stories as opposed to just drawing them. So what I typically would do is make like illustrations indicative of the entire story, and I would know the story, but
Mm,
you would just see one drawing that was indicative of this whole 100-page thing that was created.
yeah, man. I was going to ask you. So, do you think that um, do you think that you kind of already answered this already? I don't. I'm not going to revisit that. That's cool. Um, what I do want to get into though, is some of these clips. We're going to show some clips from the Injustice League. They're very very short, obviously, because we do our diffs. But I want you to talk about like what was the thought process behind um, some of the art designs and styles that come with some of these. So let's start with the nurse. Um, we get a clip here of just the nurse, with the stretching the thing, and then here we go when they're clocking out. Yes. So what was the inspiration with, or like let's talk about like what went into how you design the nurse.
Yes. So the initial idea I remember of the project was in showing how you want it to have the villains on one side and the
Mm,
heroes on the other side, like Shaolin Showdown, and them like coming together. And I was thinking, like, how can we like build to a point where we have that coming together? How can we establish that? And my thought was that if we show what people would consider to be superheroes, and then we show these regular people, that would establish who the villains are. And we think that the heroes are like the superheroes, people that are flying around and doing all this crazy stuff. But the regular people are ending their day jobs. So the nurse, especially, the nurses know more than doctors oftentimes. They're responsible for more than doctors. And a lot of people just see them in a mask and a suit and don't understand that they're in charge of hundreds of lives and that they work these super long shifts and they deal with all this stress and all this pressure. So with the nurse character, I really wanted her to exemplify uh, a hero that exists in just every day that people don't even consider, and that also, like, at the end of the day, at the end of her shift, she takes her super suit off and goes about her life. And as a regular person, you would never know that she's out here saving people's lives like on a minutely basis.
Yeah, and I noticed too. Yeah, so like yeah, we definitely were trying to get to that Shaolin Showdown esque, or even like the '90s X-Men intro, the ending where you got the villains. Yeah, we were trying to end with that. Um, so like the concept. Let's talk about the concept because so Injustice League is a poem that I wrote in 2020 um, about um, the experience of being, a black person in America and the things that I felt like we went through and that we struggle with as black people in America. And I used comic book references from, um, obviously ones that I was a fan of growing up, which are pretty much Marvel, DC, and Milestone. Shout out to Dwayne McDuffie. Um, and when we were, when I was using those characters to kind of, bring into context, I didn't want to use those same licensed characters for a video, but I also wanted to bring some, bring some attention to like the real everyday heroes, right? Like we have these heroes who we believe we fantasize about, and then we have the heroes that are the everyday heroes that are fighting. And so the concept behind this video was to show from the, I think it was from the view of the two young men, right? That I think that's the lens we were looking at. We had these two young men, and one that I have right here is the older young man, right? Walking through the neighborhood. Um, and we were trying to figure out how we could get them to see that the everyday heroes are the ones who are the real saviors, even though we don't give them the gratitude that we should all the time, right? Our barbers, or our teachers, our nurses, right, our lawyers, and I thought that was a dope idea. Like I said, it was very ambitious at the time, and then like we got into some of the action scenes and things of that nature. Let's talk about that dragon fight, man, because I thought that was one of the dopest things you did. Uh, and like, there's even like the guy who fights him. Like, he's probably like my favorite character out of all of them, like that you drew, because like the the lineup of the black characters, black superheroes. Let's talk about it, bro. Before we get to the dragon fight, let's talk about this thing with with artists in general. I'm not even gonna classify which type of artists, but different artists trying to draw black characters and then lineups. We're talking about like people like when I think about like Captain Planet and the African kid from Captain Planet, or um, just some of the, and I think about the hairstyles, and I'm like, uh, like it's cool that we're represented in these shows, but and I loved how you paid attention to the detail. Like, can you give some commentary to that?
Yeah, that's one of the benefits of being black. Like, it's just something that I think about, and
Sure.
especially a lot of artists that don't come from our culture, their closest reference point for our people are our celebrities. to the point that a lot of them will just straight up trace celebrities. Like there's Nubia, a comic that came out, and they traced this influencer named the Samurai. They traced Serena Williams and making the Nubia show. And because of that, Nubia doesn't have a face. Like you know what Superman looks like when somebody draws him. You know what Wolverine looks like when somebody draws him. And when you watch Todd McFarlane draw Wolverine, Wolverine looks like Todd McFarlane. When you see Jim Lee draw certain characters, they might bend a little bit more Asiatic in their features, but like the facial structure remains the same. Our faces, the way that we're naturally built, is so unique on the planet that when people that don't understand how to draw us try it, a lot of the features can be over exaggerated. When you're drawing with a pencil, you're dealing with millimeters, where if that nose is a millimeter too wide or those lips are a millimeter too big, you end up in a situation. And a lot of artists put themselves at risk. So for me, fortunately, being around Black people my whole life, it's only natural for me to draw people that look like the people that I grew up with, and they've homogenized to a point where I know where the line is in what is extreme expression or caricature as opposed to representation. I think that only comes from time. So like Neil Adams, for example, who's popularized the Green Lantern, John Stewart, his John Stewart has an afro. And when he created John Stewart, his idea was, why does every Black person in comics have to be from the hood or from Africa? Like, let's give us a Black person that's a regular guy. And for the 70s or 80s, that was a pretty cool idea. But like Falcon and John Stewart were corny. And it took a long time to figure out you could only really make a cool Black character from Black people in an authentic manner, because the archetypes for a cool Black person before then were stereotypes. You had Shaft and Mac and Superfly, and that's why you had Luke Cage talking how he talked for a long time. And then 30 years later in the 2000s, you got Luke Cage running around in a do-rag with a goatee looking like Tupac or 50 Cent.
I love that. So let's get to this dragon fight. One of the coolest action scenes of this story. Like, so what was the inspiration here?
I was thinking about Sentai. I was thinking about like Godzilla. That's not Sentai. What's Godzilla called?
What is Godzilla?
It's
That's
kaiju.
yes.
Yes, I was thinking about kaiju and how I was watching. There was an anime that featured like these kaiju characters, and they actually wanted to replicate how in the old school Godzilla was a suit, and it was a person inside of a suit, and that's why he was moving the way that he did. So I took a video of me moving and doing the swipes and stuff, and then I rotoscoped that, and I drew the dragon on top of that. And that's why the motion is the way the motion is. And then after that, to draw the person, I drew like a line of where I wanted the flight path to be. And I put a dot there to represent the person flying. I remember reading a story about Leonardo da Vinci's apprentice, where the apprentice put a dot on the painting, and he said zzz with his mouth. And because of that auditory stimulation, Leonardo thought there was a fly on his painting, and he kept hitting the painting until the apprentice made him realize that it was a dot that was of paint. So it made me realize that I could do a little bit of a cheat to show the scale of the character, and then zoom in into the superhero to show him actually doing it. And then even in that, the different smears show speed, and then when he makes impact, there's a flash of white. And those are things in animation that allow you not just to cut down on time, but to allow the mind to fill in the blanks. So when you watch like a lot of 90s anime, including Dragon Ball Z and Rurouni Kenshin, they're not that well animated, but between the sound and the visuals, they leave blank space where everything's not spaced out. And that's why it can feel even more impressive than a super technical Naruto fight scene 20 years later.
And then, so to kind of change, to kind of like do a little bit of a pivot, let's talk about commissioned artwork. And I know that a lot of times when you're given, when people are requesting work from you, there's a vision, right? There's a vision of this is what I want, this is what I'm looking for, and then obviously, you're working within the confines of your gifts and your talents and your style. Um, what does that look like to kind of make that compromise with what the person who's asking for the art wants, and then what you can provide for them? And does that usually? And I'm assuming it works out for you eventually at the end. But what does that look like?
Yeah, typically, like construction, like a lot of other things, the drafting process is the best tool. For me, I typically will create a rough draft, like a sketch, and then once that's approved, there's like either no going back or there's a penalty for going back so that you can kind of see from the beginning how something starts and then how it's going to be. So even for like us, I think the day that you told me what you wanted to do, I think either the same day or within a couple of days, I drew out like 60 sketches of like
Yeah,
every scene of the
I
thing.
think we still got that the storyboard. Yeah.
Yes. And that's like typically how they do that in illustration, which gives the client an idea what's going to happen and then the artist a blueprint to go off of. But uh, what a lot of artists don't realize and a lot of creative people don't understand is that everyone can't see the full finished potential from a sketch, and that it's really on them to communicate that process effectively. And there's a lot of responsibility that goes that gets that is not recognized by creatives, and is especially in the era we're in now, is very important for creatives not just to assert their value and charge a whole lot, but to really ensure that there is equitable value in creative collaboration and creative work, especially through communication and well, yeah, especially through communication and execution in pieces, so that if something along the way of the process gets disturbed, like there's not a problem on both sides. A lot of artists will they'll hold art for a long time, they'll juggle more commissions than they can manage, and then just through maturity or whatever, sometimes we don't know what our limits are until we hit them, and it's on us to take that on the chin and like communicate that we might have bitten off more than we can chew, and like explore alternatives or whatever, and that just comes through experience.
Mm. And we experienced that.
Yes, absolutely. That was the first time that I ever like actually burned out making anything. I was shocked.
Yeah. But I mean, there's been animation since then. There's been animations before then that have been done in great taste. I mean, and even this one, like I said, this project has been. We just have to, like, we still use these gifts, all like uh in a lot of different things. I use them as memes in group chat sometimes. Um,
For real?
yeah, I have to.
Wow.
You know, when I want to punch somebody, like, hey man, stop playing with me. But that's cool, man. Let's flip the page a little bit. What are some of your favorite anime and manga that have released? I mean, I don't know, in our lifetime, man. Let's talk about it.
I really love anime that blend philosophy, humor, and art. My favorite anime of all time is Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Second favorite is one called Kaguya-sama Love is War, which is about a school principal and a school vice principal that are in love with each other, but they've been trained to be so competitive in their academic careers that they believe that who love is war, and whoever admits their love first loses. And they spend the entire show trying to convince the other to like admit their love for the other, basically. And my third favorite is called Heaven's Lost Property, which is like a super fan service show that just has all this cosmology and philosophy and psychology built into it and history and stuff. And then after that, it's on a case by case basis. There's a lot that I like about a show called Michiko Tohashin, which takes place in Brazil, which is about a woman that breaks out of jail and to find the father of her child. And it takes place in Brazil and kind of explores that underground culture, which is really cool. And everything after that, there's pieces of a lot of anime that I like, But I
Mm-hmm.
stopped consistently watching anime about 5 years ago because I
Okay.
found that the culture that anime produces can be very insular and very uh, it can be less than concrete or less than complete, and people can end up following seasons or idealized versions of stories and characters as opposed to what the story is and really sinking their teeth into that. So
Mm-hmm.
wanting more, I started studying like first I got into manga heavily, and I especially found like Vagabond. And after I found Vagabond, which centers on the life of Miyamoto Musashi, that's basically only read like Eastern philosophy. Like the Book of Five Rings was written by Musashi, the Dokudo, which was written by Musashi, and then like stuff like The Unfettered Mind was written by Takuan Soho, who was a Zen monk during the time of Musashi. That he's a recurring character like Rafiki in the Vagabond comic. And then that led me to like this book called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha, which is a book of Korean Zen. That led me to stories on different Korean Zen monks. The thing that I really like about Korean Zen as opposed to Japanese Zen is Zen comes from the Chinese word seon. And in Japanese, the word Zen directly translates to emptiness, basically. And in China, their philosophy was like, people suck. Go live in the mountains and meditate, and you don't have to deal with people sucking. And then in Japan, they were like, people suck. Go live in the mountains so you don't have to deal with people. And in Japan, they had the warrior monks because Oda Nobunaga realized the political power that Buddhism had, and he tried
Mm-hmm.
to like actively like destroy it. He was running around torching temples and killing monks and all types of stuff. So even then, they still had to train and they still had to fight. And then in Korea, they had nowhere to escape to because Korea has always been under occupation from China or Japan or Russia or America.
Mm-hmm.
So Korean Zen is less so about escapism and more about acceptance. And there's a Korean monk named Wanhyo who effectively was like a prodigy, and he went all around the world learning from different masters. And one day he decided, I'm tired of Korea. I've learned all that I can. I'm going to go to China and learn the true secret of Zen. And when he was on this path, the nightfall came and it was raining. So he prayed to the Buddha for somewhere to rest his head. And he was in the dark, and his hands found the opening of a door, and he's noticed he was in a cave. So he sat in the cave and he was like, thank you, Buddha, for giving me somewhere to rest my head. And it was warm. And then he realized he was thirsty. So he prayed to the Buddha for water. And as he felt on the ground, he felt a cup, and the cup was full of the sweetest water that he'd ever had. He like, thank you, Buddha, for giving me something to drink. So then he went to sleep, so grateful, with so much gratitude. He couldn't see anything, but he felt the comfort that he was surrounded by. And then when he woke up, he noticed that he was in an open grave, and that the cup that he had drinking from the previous night was a skull with rotting flesh still on it and maggots.
Mm-hmm.
And he was drinking dirty rainwater from a skull, and he puked all over the place and he was disgusted. But then he realized that yesterday this was an amazing warm habitat, and he was drinking the sweetest water that he ever had. And the only difference between yesterday and today was that he could see. He realized that his perception dictated his reality. And if your perception dictates your reality, and you can choose how you perceive the world around me, and that'll change your entire experience and your health, then he didn't need to go to China to find the truth of Buddhism. He needed to change his perspective so that he could find the truth in the place that he was. And that's also in that same principle the thing that got me away from being so dead set of learning Asian martial arts in Asia languages, to being able to see the beauty of African martial arts and African art forms such as like capoeira and dambe and guni stick fighting and things like that, and even being able to ingest the philosophy of different African cultures from Haiti and Jamaica and Ghana and Nigeria, as opposed to being dead set to only studying these texts that came from Asia.
I love that, man. I love that. Like that whole thing you just did is a clip. Like this is beautiful, man. This is a great episode. This is a great episode, man. Um, yeah. So with that being said, I mean, so we talked about Boondocks as an inspiration for you. We talked about a lot of the Afrofuturism um, um, inspiration that came into your art. Is there any other art styles or comics or manga or anything like that that you felt like was a huge inspiration early on and a huge inspiration now?
Yeah, Deadly Class. I think the artist name is like David Keith. I really like the style in Deadly Class because it looks like a stencil, like spray painting, like a punk rock like poster from like the '90s, and the colors that are used are really wild. And a lot of the independent comics from Image Comics are made using like a two-tone odd color style that'll communicate the emotion based on whatever colors you're seeing in the screen, from like Deadly Class to it's called Saga. There's a lot of different Image comics that have these really bold, unique choices when it comes to color, and also the style is really simple. And the thing that I always loved about manga and anime that a lot of Western comics never did was they were afraid to use different art styles to showcase different emotions. Whereas in an anime, if something's really serious, you'll get this really like stone faced and all these lines and all this shading. And then when something's lighter, a character might turn into like a little chibi cute balloon animal. And then in America, all the characters look realistic, and sometimes it can get so realistic that the comic becomes like a painting. You might get like some Lee Bermejo stuff. So being able to have that fluency in art style was really important for me in my development. Battle Angel Alita also has some of my favorite art ever, just the amount of density. There's an artist named Sean Gordon Murphy, who's an American artist. His style is very heavily influenced by like the mechs and vehicles and technology and stuff in a lot of Japanese properties. And he did Tokyo Ghost, and he also did Batman's White Knight. And he's an artist in addition to being a writer that has these big monologues and a lot of the stuff that he makes. But the density that a lot of the mechanical artists had, even people like Kim Jong-gi, really inspired me when I was first learning to make comics, because they could fit so many Easter eggs and details into a page. And now I kind of went in the opposite direction. One, for the sake of time, and two, for the sake of clarity and storytelling, where I want to see how much I can get away with in simple art, and really making the shapes pop out and using the colors to kind of show that. So, like in the Color of Liberty comic that I have, there's a page where there's a fight on a Caribbean island where people are like shooting guns. And in the 1970s, when people would shoot guns, you'd see the trail of the bullet as like kind of like it was shot from like a laser going across the screen. So you have these different gunshots shooting all over the screen while like gold is flying in the air because a treasure chest just got stabbed. And then a warrior is like stabbing a Frenchman through the mouth with a machete, and his teeth are flying off of the side of the machete. And that stuff you can only get away with if you make things a little bit more cartoony. And I also grew up with my grandma watching old cartoons from like the 40s and 50s and 60s. And not only are those cartoons really violent, like Tom and Jerry type of stuff, but they're creative with their violence, and they'll use personification. They'll bend the rules of reality in order to give more utility to like something like a tree, where a tree can turn into like a harp, or like a dumbbell will be used in the Tom and Jerry short as like a baseball bat or whatever. And I really wanted to
Yeah.
be able to express that in the stuff that I was making.
Hmm. So then, how are we gonna do this graphic? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Yeah. So with that being said, man, I want to kind of give a little bit more um, of a shout out to your art. And so, of course I wrote a book um, in 20. Well, it contains a lot of poems that I wrote from the pandemic era, from 2020 to 2022, and the book released in the end of 23. And here's the book here, Lessons I Never Taught. One of my uh, biggest accomplishments that I have, outside of my biggest accomplishment, is obviously mentoring the youth when it comes to poetry. But this is a poetry book that I created. The artwork was done by none other than Lee Juaso. And we could talk about a little bit about how we got to this artwork, and going back to that commission question, right? About the person's idea versus your style and your limitations to your abilities. And let's talk about this, man. Like the cover. So of course you can see that's supposed to be me right there. I think it looks exactly like me, actually. So he does a good job of making that relevant. And then we have the different comic books in the background, and you guys should buy a book. You can see this a lot more clear if you buy your own version of it. Lessons I Never Taught. Check that out. Yeah, and so let's talk about that, man. Like I remember we did a IG live. You were trying to get some inspiration for how you wanted to actually create this cover. Um, what inspired like how you went about making doing the IG live? I know we talked for a little bit. We talked for a long time, but I felt like it became more of a conversation about different things and not just the cover, right? And I don't know if that kind of still everything that was going on kind of still influenced the way you created the cover. If you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, bro. I think the thing that might make me a little different than a lot of artists is because I have had such a strong commerce background for so long and an upbringing around commerce. Like my dad had me reading like Robert Kiyosaki and stuff when I was little, even though I couldn't understand it.
Mm-hmm.
I've always really been obsessed with value and how to kind of bring value. I've always felt like if you can root something in undeniable truth, and earlier on before I studied what I've studied now, that undeniable truth for me was really like history. I figured that you could kind of trace the lines of how something came into being, especially generationally and through lineage. So when we look at like, especially from a Pan African lens, when we look at expression in art and creation, we stand on the shoulders of the ancestors, and our existence alone is in homage to them and in giving reverence and acknowledgement to them, because we know that in history, there have been so many forces that have tried to erase them. Like they blew the nose off the Sphinx, they defaced so many monuments, they changed
Mm-hmm.
scripture in the Bible so that we wouldn't know who we are. And now the power is in our hands to kind of write history in our image and fix so many of those wrongs that have been done. But being able to pack that value into a visual form without talking people's heads off is really difficult. And then doing it in a manner where there people are going to want to buy it, or people are going to be able to find meaning in it, is really important to me. So the first thing, and something that I have a very, very big problem with in art, is a lot of people don't take the time to understand dark skin and how it works and why it's important, from tattoo artists to photographers to illustrators to painters. And oftentimes when you see them, like they make us like ashy, or like they don't understand contrast, or they'll use like white ink on like dark skin when they're giving people tattoos, and they light us badly. They'll light us with like blue and green and stuff, not understanding how colors work and that our skin has pigment the same way that paint has pigment. So in drawing, a couple of years ago, I really sat down and tried to figure out how can I draw like the deepest skin possible, and not just make it like black for the sake of being black, but really understand how to show that even though our skin absorbs more light, there is shadow and there is light and there is shine and there is life. And learning to do lighting, especially soft lighting, helped a lot, because the gradation between a dark brown and the darker brown needed to make a shadow is very difficult to display. But if you go from dark brown to black, then you end up, that's not realistic unless you have harsh shadows. If you have a super harsh light, then the highlight has to dang near be white in order for the shadows to be black. So that was the first thing. Is like I really wanted to show like the beauty and the depth of your skin and how important that is. That was like the first thing that was really important to me. And then the second thing was the background, the covers, and showing that we do not exist. Your creations do not exist without all the people that have influenced you, from the Harlem Renaissance to the 60s, people like Nikki Giovanni, and then modern people. Because a lot of people, when they talk about Black history, they want to stick us in sinners' times. And we've been around for a while. Some of us made it out of the civil rights movement. We didn't all get
100%.
shot in the head. So like being able to put your mentor in there made me very really really happy, and being able to like go to Baltimore and meet y'all and see y'all do what y'all do, even like being able to visit y'all clubhouse. You was playing what, gin rummy, bridge? What the heck was y'all playing in there with them cards?
With the cards, where was this? Where was this? At the clubhouse?
Spades? Yeah, in the clubhouse, in
I
the
can't remember.
fraternity clubhouse.
Oh, yeah, they were definitely playing spades. Yes, 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 yeah. I forgot you came to that. Yes, yes. Before the show, yeah,
Yeah,
we had to make a stop. Yes,
yeah. So
yeah.
being
So yeah,
able,
no, that culture. Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, dude, that's a core memory unlocked.
yeah. Yeah, so all that is important and all that go into the art. And fortunately, the community I was able to curate going live all the time understood that perspective, had that blend of influences and inspirations in history and spirituality and technical understanding to be able to help guide me. And especially I was like 20, 21 at the time, and was literally at home. Like I was either at home training or traveling from the ages of like 19 to 24. So they really like helped to raise me in a large way, just being on live and taking in a perspective.
Yeah, I love that. I love that interpretation, man. That was dope. That was dope. Um, that's I mean, this is going to make me look at art a lot differently moving forward. Like, hey, man, make sure you get that. Make sure you get that skin color just right, bro. You know, black skin has pigmentation, same way that paint does. You know, and even like looking at tattoos. And I'm about to be looking at tattoos differently. That's crazy. Um, but yeah, before we end though, I kind of want to ask you. Well, this always a special question I ask every guest that comes through here. But before we get to that, I want to know what are some of the things that you are consuming right now as far as media, and whether that be books, television shows, movies, things of that nature. And then, what are some things you can recommend for our viewers?
Yeah, personally, I'm really heavy in the scripture right now. I was found a couple years ago this piece called the Bible Project, and what I really liked about it was that they broke down Christianity as an interconnect, well, the Bible specifically, excuse me, as an interconnected story leading to Christ. And their whole thing is that the whole Bible sequentially should lead you to the point where you see the value of Christ as a figure and a symbol and as a person, in order
Mm,
to like allow you to help either a be a better person or enhance your understanding of why the world is the way that it is. And the thing that I most appreciate about it is that they break things down in English and in Hebrew, because I grew up around a bunch of Hebrew Israelites and like Muslims and stuff, like black Muslims and stuff like that. And it always frustrated me that even though they reference these concepts in these other languages or from these other cultures, even like to this day, like I carry like an Ethiopian cross on my neck to like remember that Christianity was in Africa before it was like in Europe for the most part. But realistically speaking, if you're not from that culture or you don't speak that language and have a really intimate connection to it, you're missing out on a lot of the context in those words. So
mm,
and in helping to understand terms that exist in Hebrew that were later translated into all these other languages, it's made me closer in my faith and helped me to root my faith in something real or practical, instead of an interpretation of an interpretation of an interpretation, especially with all of the resources we have access to over these last 60, 70, 80 years. There's also the YouTube channel Esoterica, where this doctor, Justin Sledge, kind of breaks down concepts like Kabbalah and the Talmud and stuff like that, and pulls the veil back on the cultural context of the scriptures that inform Christianity's existence, because ultimately Christianity does come from like Judaism and like Hebrew history and experience. And
mhm,
there's not a ongoing discussion in a lot of churches, especially black churches, on the connection between the history and culture that influenced Christianity, and then the histories and cultures that sprung out as a result of it. And there's a lot of tangled knots that exist that are doing a lot of harm to us, and the reason why a lot of our people have a difficult time spiritually. So those, and then also coming from that Eastern philosophy background of Zen and Buddhism and impermanence, and eventually going to the Indian thing, seeing that those same principles and concepts and understandings exist in especially the wisdom books of the Bible and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes. All of Proverbs is basically like You can be wise and do all this stuff that makes sense. That's effectively yin and yang, and then yi, the change. Taiji, by definition, is the shifting between a state of yin, a state of yieldingness, and a state of yang, a state of chaos or dynamism. And then taiji is that moving from piece to piece. Ji or yi literally means change. So it's a state of change from yin and yang. That same thing is what wisdom is in the Bible. It's recognizing that these things are two parts of one whole. And when you have that wholeness, you have the wisdom that the universe was constructed in. But then in Ecclesiastes, that the thesis of that kind of book, to my interpretation, is like, you can know everything in the world, you could have done all this cool stuff, but like ultimately it's meaningless. You can't have your head so far up in your ego that you're not living life and accepting what comes with it. And it really inspired me not to be so heady and so verbose in all the things that I've been studying, that I forget to live life and go dance and bust a wine and all that fun stuff. Like, life is still meant to be lived, and you gonna die eventually. So you only gonna leave with the memories that you have.
I love that. So you saying that there's nothing in the Eastern theology and philosophy that doesn't state the same thing that Ecclesiastes is saying?
I'm saying that so in the Eastern mode, that letting go of that transcendence of the cycle of samsara, which is life and death or suffering, that would be nirvana by definition, is escaping suffering.
Yeah.
And the thing that always confused me about the Indian religions is that there's thousands and thousands of gods with thousands of stories, and that even though they put so much context and story and weight on the concept of karma and samsara and reincarnation, they're also throwing bodies into the river Ganges so that people can escape reincarnation. And the people that have managed to escape reincarnation, they deify. And I felt like, if you're accepting karma as a cycle where the good things you do on earth allow you to have a better life when you return, why would you want to escape that? And there's a lot of context that I feel is often missing, especially when we're exploring these other faiths or religions or spiritual systems without the context of actually being in them, looking from the inside out. Whereas it's, I think, much clearer through scripture when you take the time to understand how to study it, but it's really hard. And even studying like the poetry of Rumi, who I love. My favorite poem ever is by Rumi, and it's called Bismillah. It's basically about a person who holds on to a grudge for so long. And they said, with such attachments, how do you expect to arrive anywhere? And then it just goes down the list of the pain that you bring yourself by holding on to things, and how it makes your life like a burden. And then if you want to get rid of that burden, you have to think of that self that carries the burdens like the animal that carries the sins of the people. And when you had animal sacrifice in biblical times, you would cast all of the sins onto the animal, and then the priest would slaughter it, and through that the sins were released. And so it says, in the same way that the priest sacrifices the animal, you sacrifice your old self to find your true name, like to try to find your true self. That's like, to this day, that's like my favorite poem.
Man, there's a lot to unpack to what you say. I want to go on a tangent so bad because I want to be like, because like, even like when you were talking about like, if you live a good life, and so that karma, that's how karma works, right? You live a good life so that when you die you can be reincarnated with more. Why would you want to escape that? And it's like this whole idea of being a deity takes over. So it's like the human preservation kind of thing where you're like, well, if I can escape that, I can be a deity. But like, why become a god when you can have all those good things carry over into oh man. Okay, all right, we're not gonna go there though. But
I'll be here all night. I like tanning.
But let's all right. So let's get into more. We're gonna be winding down just a little bit. So Lee, I asked this question to everybody. Um, and you could take time to think about it for a little bit too if you need. But what do you feel like is the role of the Black creative in 2026 in today's time? Just considering all the context of the um, political state of the world, the context of everything going on in the world today. Um, what is the role of the black creator in that space? And I want
I,
you to think of this like very, very broadly. It's not just specifically for a poet or a rapper or artist, just in, very broadly.
I think number one, they need to understand themselves and do the internal work necessary to understand piece by piece why it is they create what they do. A lot of us, we create from our subdued emotion and feeling and experiences that have just been compressed into this thing that lives inside of us. And it can be
Mm,
great fuel, but it can also burn us alive. That's why a lot
mm,
of artists have bad relationships and drug problems and all types of stuff. And once you break that down and really understand the components that cause you to be what you are, you're more free to express yourself because you understand how to give a piece of yourself to your creation instead of just exploding all over the canvas or exploding
mm,
all over the notepad. And you can, one, give more value, two, receive more value, and three, be okay with not getting the maximum out input from your output. A lot of people give their all, so they want all back. And when they don't get it, no matter how objectively well they're being poured into, they feel unsatisfied. And that dissatisfaction has nothing to do with the reward and everything to do with the way that they value themselves. So, number one, they need to do the internal work to understand why it is that they are driven to create what they're creating. The second thing is to understand in pieces what the value of their work is to those outside of them. They need to understand how they can break down their artistic expression into skills or services, not necessarily that are inherently practical for the purpose of making money, but definitely practical for being able to connect to people. So, for example, as an illustrator, you have to learn how to see, how to perceive, how to communicate, how to study. Studying is very important. And you can flip those back. And if you're able to perceive, then you can project and you can plant ideas into people's minds. If you can communicate your art, you might be able to communicate other people's art, especially if you understand how to study it. And that's why a lot of creators end up putting on or becoming educators of some sort. All the YouTube artists are all art teachers. You just often they're so entertaining that you don't realize that you're learning until it's too.
mm.
All of the great artists that give these workshops and their
That's
speeches,
good.
they're teaching. Like that's what they're doing. And if they're performing, they're still connecting to people. And even if they don't realize it consciously, they're recognizing what people want. And you'll get people like Yayoi Kusama or Ez Devlin who like they'll just draw bubbles or they'll create an experience for people and give people something to connect to. And then through their collaborations with people like Kanye West or the MoMA or whatever, they're able to connect further. And I think really as Black artists, we have to understand what our value is to the segment of our people that we want to engage. And then we really have to not be afraid to engage them and to either go where they are or go where
Mm,
we'll be heard. We can't just sit in our rooms all day talking about all the stuff that we want to make. And if we're not going to create something, we need to be able to pour into people and communities and organizations and spaces so that things can be created. So like for me, when I was growing as an artist, I spent a lot of time in this place called the Amalgam Comics and Coffee House, which is a Black owned comic book shop and cafe run by a lady named Ariel Johnson. And just the people in there were like Black rappers and musicians and poets and writers. And they just talked to me. And their conversations did, and them putting me on to new media and giving me a safe place to develop and learn and grow allowed me to explore independent comics and explore different pieces that otherwise would never know anything about. Or like this dude Chris Williams, who's an artist from Philadelphia. He had this comic called The Summons, and he would have a cosplay drink and draw, and he'd bring in these cosplayers to cosplay as his characters, and a bunch of artists would just come and draw them. I'm like 18 years old, and I'm wilding in with my book bag, and I had to go through all these heroin gangsters and stuff to get to the comic shop. And I'm sitting in there. These dudes is drinking like whiskey and like wine and like tea and stuff. And I'm sitting here with my little notepad just scribbling up at this cosplayer. And like those experiences wouldn't have been created if those older artists didn't pour into me. And we have to remember that no matter how many followers we have or like how we think our lives are or whatever, we pay forward all that comes before us, same way that we were talking about with the cover, by really pouring into the communities and spaces that'll allow the people that are going to surpass us, the people that are going to be able to carry our names forward one day, to do that.
Love that, man. That's so much to unpack right there, man. And I hope that when this episode drops, people are taking notes, man. We gonna make sure that we get that out there. But yeah, man, I love this episode. Thank you so much, bro, for offering your insight. It was very valuable today. I learned a lot tonight for sure.
Much love,
Um,
bro. Thank you for being who you are.
and it's I feel like that's not hard though. People thank me for being who I am, but I'm like that's not hard. You know, um, it's definitely harder to be someone else. For sure. Um, but yeah, you know, thank you guys for popping in, man. If you can, please like and subscribe to the channel. We would love that. Um, but again, Lee, before we go, I want to thank you again for coming through. Do you mind telling people, how they can find you if they want to, check out some of your work, or even, you know, if he's available, you might be able to do some commission work.
Much love. I'm Lee Juaso. If you look up Juaso, you can probably find me. If your business needs some marketing stuff, some website content stuff, you can look up studiojuaso.com and find all my services on there. And really, just I want you all to remember that you are the author of your own existence and that you need to put in the work to understand who you are and why you are that way and what you can do to become the greatest form of that being possible.
I wish I would have soloed you when you did that, but it's okay. It's okay. All right, man. We are about to get up out of here, man. Listen, it's the class is over. I just again want to say thank you guys for pulling up. Until next time, thank y'all.
Peace.